4 chilling true accounts of unexplained terror that will leave you haunted and shaken. In a quiet suburb of Ohio, where picket fences and manicured lawns create a seemingly perfect facade, Sarah's life unraveled into a nightmare. It began with the sounds, an eerie scratching at the walls after dark that clawed at her sanity. What was it? A raccoon? The wind? She could feel the pulse of fear thrum steadily like a heartbeat in the back of her mind. Each night she clocked into her shift at the diner, the din of clattering plates and booming laughter contrasting painfully with the sinister silence that awaited her at home. Then there were the flickering porch lights. At first it was just annoying, but as they blinked erratically in an unholy rhythm, terror crawled under her skin. The first time she noticed it, she dismissed it, tiredness clouding her thoughts. But every time she returned after a long night, her heart raced and that feeling of being watched tightened around her throat. Weeks dragged by, the unease escalating. Shadows twisted and wriggled at the corners of her vision, as if alive and waiting. Lily, her teenage daughter, would often sit by the window, her gaze transfixed on the house next door, her face pale. "Mom, can we not look out tonight?" she whispered, as if daring the darkness itself. The once lively street turned into a place where silence thrived, a breeding ground for paranoia. Innocuous smiles exchanged with neighbors morphed into something more sinister as Sarah began noticing suspicious gatherings in the backyard of the perfect family next door. Strange figures clad in dark clothes, whispers swirling like a storm around her mind. Her butt tightened with each passing evening. Who were they, and what were they hiding behind those perfect smiles? Sarah's instincts ignited a flame of determination. She had to know. She dug into their past, her hands trembling as she unearthed a web of unsolved disappearances, haunting tales that stretched back decades, like shadows lengthening over her reality. A familiar face, the man next door, the very one who waved while mowing his lawn, wore a mask that began to chip away under her scrutiny. Was it paranoia or a desperate harbinger of truth? Each revelation sent chills racing down her spine, her heart pounding like thunder against her ribs. One night, a storm swept through. Heavy rain clattered on the roof as Sarah's phone buzzed frantically. "Mom, I'm scared." Lily's texts flooded in, punctuated by frantic emojis. She was home alone, the house swallowed by darkness, the power flickering ominously. Sarah's blood ran cold as she raced through the downpour, shadows slinging along the street, as if urging her to turn back. Finally she arrived, breathless and panicked. The door stood ajar, a sickening wave of dread crashed over her. "Lily," she called, the ominous silence swallowing her voice. Heart racing, she stepped inside, each creak of the floorboards echoing like a warning.
Just then she heard it, a hollow laughter echoing down the hall, haunting and familiar. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. She steeled herself, the thrill of dread wrapping tight around her heart. Uncertainty flickered through her mind as she approached the source of the laughter, fueled by sheer terror. What awaited her in the shadows was a truth more frightening than she ever imagined. The malevolence that encircled her home wasn't just outside. It lay within, concealed beneath layers of trust and familiarity. As she advanced, her breath caught. The darkness shifted around her, vibrant with malicious intent, and she could feel it. The predator was close. The floorboards creaked behind her, a menacing echo in the suffocating silence. Was she too late to save her daughter, or had the darkness already consumed them both? Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing like a war drum. The laughter grew louder, a cacophony of sinister joy creeping through the walls. It was a mockery, a taunt meant to draw her deeper into the darkness. Lily's voice was distant now, lost among the shadows that beckoned. "Lily!" she shouted, the words slicing through the thick air, desperation lacing her tone. It felt absurd, crying out as if the house itself could answer back. But she was on the edge of a precipice, teetering between sanity and madness. And then, just as suddenly as it started, the laughter ceased, hanging in the air like a heavy fog. Sarah stepped cautiously into the hallway, her feet moving of their own accord, driven by a mix of dread and maternal instinct. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a warning bell, her breath quickening with every silent step. The house had transformed. It was no longer a place of comfort. Each corner cloaked itself in malevolence, as though the walls had learned the art of deception. Just ahead, the light from the living room flickered weakly, casting elongated shadows that danced mockingly on the walls. The flickering threatened to plunge her back into darkness, but she pressed on, clenching her fists against the cold sweat pooling in her palms. "Lily!" she called again, panic clawing at her throat. There was no response, just the oppressive silence pressing in on her. It was a silence that wrapped around her, an unsettling cloak of expectation. What awaited her at the end of the hall? Was Lily safe? As she neared the living room, she heard a slight rustle, like hushed whispers too faint to understand, but pregnant with sinister secrets. It was coming from the corner where the shadows pooled the thickest. Sarah peered into the murky darkness, her heart racing. "This isn't happening," she whispered to herself, trying to beat back the wave of fear threatening to drown her. Then, without warning, the lights blinked off, plunging her into total darkness. A shriek burst from her lips, but it was swallowed by the void. She reached frantically for the wall to steady herself, her fingers brushing against cool plaster. There was no escape. She was trapped in a nightmare with her fears. A slithering sound broke the silence. Was it in her head? Or was something real lurking just beyond her sight? A whisper floated through the darkness, soft, sinister, intimate. "Sarah." It chilled her to the bone, an icy finger tracing down her spine. How did they know her name? Her mind raced. Memories rushed back, the strange smiles, the gathering shadows next door. Was she being watched this entire time? "Mom!" came a distant, muffled cry, and the pure terror that punctured Sarah's heart drove her to action. She stumbled forward, desperate to reach her daughter, but she crashed into something solid, a figure, thick and dark, blocking her path. "Don't turn around," it hissed, the voice dripped with malevolence. Paralyzed by fear, Sarah felt the pressure of the unknown closing in. All the horror she'd uncovered, every hint of the monstrous truth, lava-hot dread poured over her. Then another voice chimed in, this one familiar and sweet, Lily's voice, pleading, "Mom, help me!" Adrenaline surged through Sarah. She had to act. With a primal scream, she turned to face the darkness, ready to fight for her daughter, ready to unleash a torrent of rage on whatever awaited her. But the moment held its breath, the unknown heartbeat quickening, their fates entwined. The shadows shifted, revealing figures she'd never expected. Just as she saw their faces, a horrifying realization crushed her spirit. What had she truly invited in? The clamoring shadows grew closer, and all Sarah could do was watch, paralyzed in fear. The figures surrounded her, grinning with the familiarity of neighbors turned foes. In that instant, everything turned, and she understood. The game had only just begun. What awaited her in the next heartbeat? Only darkness had the answer. The darkness clung to Sarah like a wet shroud, a suffocating reminder that the figures circling her were not just apparitions of her imagination. She tried to focus on their faces, catching fragmented glimpses of the neighbors she had exchanged pleasantries with countless times. Their smiles were wrong, too wide, too knowing, each grin a cruel reflection of the joy that danced in their eyes. "Mom!" Lily's voice wove through the air again, pulling Sarah from her paralyzing fear. The sound was closer now, a beacon tangled in the web of horror surrounding her. "Help me!" Each plea drove a knife deeper into Sarah's heart, the urgency lighting a fire beneath her skin. She couldn't think straight. Fight or flight, her mind screamed. There was no time to waste. "Get away from her!" she shrieked, anger surging, feeding her fear. In that moment, the thick shadows shifted, revealing more figures stepping from the depths of the void, their shapes sprawling like oil over water. They didn't speak, but the air crackled with their nonsensical laughter, a cacophony that echoed in the dark corners of her mind.
Come play with us, Sarah, they taunted in unison, their voices a horrific melody, each cadence threaded with sharpness that made her soul shiver. It's too late to run. She moved backwards, heart racing, suffocated by the feeling of something brushing against her arms, a whisper of something that shouldn't exist. Cold dread washed over her, but propelled by maternal instinct, she lunged forward, desperate to find her daughter. Lily! But the path was turning, twisting like a grotesque funhouse. Each step she took veered from the goal, amplifying her bewilderment. The figures flanked her, closing the distance, leaving her no room for escape. Yet she couldn't let despair take hold, not now. The laughter grew louder as shadows morphed until they were no longer merely neighbors, but distorted faces and nightmare forms, adorned with sickening grins. You brought us here, Sarah. You invited us in, one hissed, its voice smooth and sickly sweet. No! Sarah's denial echoed, but her mind was reeling. Memories flooded back, the local folklore, the frightened whispers of the townsfolk, the missing children that everyone pretended not to notice. Had she unwittingly taunted the very monster of this town? Suddenly, the air shifted again. A fearful gasp, so familiar it made her heart leap. Mom, help me! The plea was followed by a shattering silence, broken only by the rhythmic pulse of Sarah's panic-stricken heartbeat. She had to find the source. She had to save her daughter. With newfound determination, she surged forward into the grotesque mass that surrounded her. Stay back! She shouted, terror fueling her voice as she fought through the crowd of specters, the laughter turning into furious howls. For a split second, the figures recoiled, as if her resolve threatened their power. In that moment of hesitation, she glimpsed a flicker of light at the far end of the room. It sparked like a distant star, impossibly faint, yet full of hope. Was it Lily? Without another thought, Sarah barreled towards it, blind to whatever danger slipped in the shadows. The wicked cackles echoed once again, now tinged with fury. You can't escape, Sarah, they screeched, chasing her with malevolent glee. But fear was no longer her master. She was a mother first, fueled only by the desperate need to keep her child safe against the darkness.
Just as she reached the edge of the light, she felt a hand grasp her wrist. Mom! It's not too late, came Lily's voice, thick with urgency. The ground beneath them trembled, and Sarah's heart nearly stopped. Time hung like a pendulum, each tick echoing promise and peril. What would she sacrifice to protect her daughter? In that heartbeat, everything suspended. The shadows lunged forward. Would they drag her back into that ravenous abyss? Or was the light her way out? Only time could tell. The shadows lunged, their forms rushing forward like smoke seeking to obscure the dwindling flame of hope. Sarah felt a chill as their grip tightened around her, clawing for her sanity, for the glimpse of light she had fought so desperately to reach. Lily's hand felt warm in comparison, a tether to reality that pulsed against the frozen darkness. Mom! Lily cried, voice trembling and desperate. You have to come with me! Now! The light flickered, threatening to snuff out, yet it pulsed with an urgency that filled Sarah with dread and determination. I'm right here! She shouted, yanking her daughter toward her, feeling the pull of the figures around them like a black hole. They were shifting closer, their laughter a cacophony of nighness that threatened to drown out Lily's terrified pleas. Don't let them touch you, Sarah screamed, clutching Lily's hand tightly. The moment their connection strengthened, she felt a surge of energy, a glimmer of defiance pushing back against the encroaching darkness. The figures writhed and pressed in, their distorted faces twisted with an almost grotesque excitement. You could have joined us, Sarah, one of them hissed, voice slithering through the air like a serpent. You could have belonged. Belonged, Sarah spat, her heart pounding against the walls of her chest, each beat a reminder of what she had to fight for. This isn't belonging. It's a prison. But the shadows roared louder, drowning out her defiance with screams. mocking her every word. They lunged again, clawing for her, and Sarah pressed forward, using Lily's small body as her shield. Every fiber of her being urged her to retreat, to surrender to despair. But she gritted her teeth, feeling the warm pulse of her daughter's tiny hand against her skin. "Trust me, Mom," Lily pleaded, pulling her toward the light. As Sarah's feet moved instinctively toward the flickering beam, she glanced back at the darkness swarming behind them. The air itself felt thick, wrapping around her limbs, as if the shadows conspired to drag her down into their lair. "Run," she shouted, her voice breaking. And they did. The world blurred into a cacophony of sound and motion, an impossible surge toward that thin line of light. The ground shook underfoot, splintering into cracks as they sped forward. With each stride, Sarah felt the weight of doubt crash in again, fast and relentless. Would they make it? Were they only delaying the inevitable?
Just as they neared the light, it flickered violently, illuminating the room in a harsh brilliance. Sarah shielded her eyes, and in that instant, she saw what loomed behind them. The figures were transforming, their forms stretching and melding into something more colossal, more terrifying. They were no longer just the people she once knew, but a grotesque assembly of nightmare that merged with the very essence of darkness. Suddenly, the floor shifted beneath her, crumbling into ash, giving way to the abyss. With instinct driving her, Sarah lunged forward, propelling both her and Lily into the blinding light. The moment they crossed over, the world exploded into a kaleidoscope of sound, a deafening roar, followed by a deep silence, as if the very rhythm of reality had paused. They landed in a heap, breathless, the shadows retreating momentarily, dissipating like fog under the sun's harsh rays. But the reprieve was fleeting. A low rumble filled the air, a warning that came from deep within the earth, and a voice, smooth and sinister, echoed in the void. "You think you've escaped? The game has only just begun." Sarah pulled Lily close, panic rising once more. They were together, but the fight was far from over. Shadows festered at the edges of the light, swirling and writhing, waiting for a chance to seize them. "What does that mean?" Lily whispered, fear coating her words. "Mom, what do we do now?" As the shadows began to reclaim their ground, creeping back toward the fragile sanctuary, Sarah realized the battle had escalated. They had escaped one nightmare, but a far worse one throbbed just beyond reach. What awaited them in this new dawn, now shrouded in uncertainty? Only a single thought twisted in Sarah's mind. Would the light guide them to safety, or would it be the beacon for darkness to rise anew? The silence that enveloped them felt more threatening than the shadows they'd fled. Sarah's heart raced as she scanned their surroundings, taking in the stark, sterile walls of what appeared to be a long-abandoned hospital ward. Flickering lights sputtered above them, casting long shadows that danced eerily on the floor. The overwhelming scent of decay hung in the air, sharp and rancid, tasting like dread on her tongue. "Mom?" Lily's voice was barely a whisper, shaking with fear, a fragile sound that seemed to echo down the empty hallway. "Where are we?" "I don't know," Sarah replied, her voice trailing off. Panic bubbled inside her. They were still inside the nightmare, just in a different form. I felt it, an innate dread tightening her chest. A shadow seemed to pool at the edges of the flickering light. Just then, a soft but chilling moan echoed through the desolate corridor, sending shivers coursing down Sarah's spine. "Who's there?" she called, her voice trembling as she grasped Lily's hand tighter. They needed to find another way out, a chance to escape this hell. From the shadows, a twisted figure emerged. It shuffled toward them, limbs drooping unnaturally, as if each step took a century. A grin split its face, revealing teeth that glimmered in the low light, sharp and yellow. Though its features were blurred, Sarah could feel its gaze boring into her. The figure stopped just outside the light, straddling the line between safety and danger. "Join us," it rasped, voice echoing like an echo from a long-forgotten place. "We can be together forever." "Run, Lily!" Sarah shouted, her instincts kicking in. She pulled her daughter away, but the moment she turned, the walls shimmered. What had once been a clear passage became an endless maze, the familiar turning into the foreign as doorways shifted and twisted, leading them deeper into despair. "Mom!" Lily cried, fear mingling with confusion. Desperation filled the little girl's eyes, making Sarah's heart ache. "Stay close," Sarah continued to pull Lily along as she darted down the hallway. Their footsteps echoed like thunder, crashing against the silence. Each turn intensified a sense of urgency, the shadows morphing, elongating into clawing hands that reached out with unseen force. Suddenly, laughter erupted from the depths of the labyrinth. A symphony of voices surrounded them, mocking and taunting, a cacophony of anguish that penetrated the thin veil of their bravery. "You can't escape. You must face the truth." It wasn't just a taunt, it was a sick promise. Sarah stopped, the weight of desperation clutching at her throat. "Lily, we need to find a way to fight back," she said, scrambling to keep a clear mind. "We can't let them control us." A flicker of courage ignited in Lily's eyes. "What do we do, Mom?" "There must be something. They're feeding off our fear." With trembling hands, Sarah scanned the area, desperate to find a weapon, anything. But the hospital offered only decay and despair. "Is this what they want?" Sarah muttered under her breath. "To have us like this, caged in our minds?" The shadows lurked closer now, coiling like snakes eager to strike. She could feel the thrumming energy of their malice wrapping around her, painfully familiar. Then the laughter stopped. Silence hung heavy, foreboding. From the depths of the darkened hallway, the large figure emerged again. Its grin widened, revealing an impossibly large mouth. "Do you really think you can fight what you are?" it asked, tilting its head, as if savoring their fear. Sarah tightened her hold on Lily. "We'll never join you." But as the figure moved closer, encroaching on the fragile light, another message crawled into Sarah's mind. Was fighting the darkness even possible, or was it simply feeding on their fears, drawing them in deeper? "Mom!" Lily's voice cut through the heavy air, panic returning. "Hold on tight, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, the intensity of the moment pulsating between them. They had come this far, they wouldn't falter now. Determined to charge back into the light, Sarah steeled her nerves. But the suffocating presence loomed large, and she knew they had to find a way to unmask the truth before it was too late, before they lost everything to the abyss. "Let's go," she urged, the shadow swirling around them like a dark storm. But just as they turned to run, the floor beneath their feet shattered, plunging into a bottomless void. What awaited them in that abyss? Would they find salvation? Or was this darkness truly insatiable? Darkness enveloped them. As they fell, time stretched, warping reality until gravity felt weightless. Sarah clutched Lily tighter, her heart pounding against her ribs like a caged animal. She could hear the echoes of their screams mingling with the rattling laughter that followed them, mocking their descent. Then, suddenly, the void gave way to a rough landing that sent waves of pain shooting through Sarah's back. She lay on the cold, damp floor, her breath hitching in her throat. "Lily!" She pushed herself upright, panic clawing at her insides. "I'm here, Mom!" The tiny voice cut through her haze, but it was subdued, muffled, as if swallowed by the oppressive air. Sarah's eyes darted around. They were in a small, claustrophobic space, an old examination room, slick with rust and grime. Old medical equipment lay scattered about, as if abandoned in a hurry. "Stay close," she urged, pulling Lily to her side. The flickering bulbs overhead buzzed menacingly, illuminating the room in harsh bursts. Shadows pooled in the corners, watching, waiting. Then the laughter surged again, echoing through the cramped room. It came from the dark doorway, a sinister invitation. "You are closer to us now, closer to the truth." "No," Sarah shouted, her voice defiant yet trembling. The words hung heavy in the air, tainted with fear. What did it mean? She felt the walls closing in, pressing against her chest. "Get ready to run." Just as she turned to flee, a harsh screech pierced the silence. The doorframe warped, twisting violently as a figure slithered into the room. It was the same twisted form they'd encountered before, its limbs even more dislocated, as if it had crawled from a nightmare. The grin spread wider, stretching impossibly across its face, and Sarah recoiled, dread pooling in her stomach. "Why do you resist?" it hissed, dragging each word like a torment. "Relinquish your fear. Join us in the dance of souls."
"No!" Sarah shouted again, forcing herself to move, to pull Lily toward the back window, a small shard of hazy light breaking through the grime. "Mom, it's everywhere!" Lily cried, her tiny frame trembling. Panic rose as Sarah struggled with the window. It was stuck, crusted over with age, but the figure was advancing. "Your fear makes us stronger," it taunted, its voice a sick whisper in the dark. "It's just a trick, Lily. We have to believe we can escape." Sarah's voice felt fragile, as if the gravity of their situation was leaching hope from every word.
She pulled with everything she had, and finally the window gave way with a crash, slivers of glass raining down like terror itself. "Climb!" Sarah urged, pushing Lily towards the gap, while the figure shrieked behind them, fingers stretching out as if trying to latch onto their souls. Lily squeezed through, and Sarah felt the icy grasp brush against her heel. She was almost through when something gripped her ankle, a sensation sharp and cold, dragging her back. "No," she gasped, realizing the thing had made contact. She fought, kicking violently, but the world around her began to dull. The smile of the creature loomed large in her vision, eyes glinting with hunger that sent an icy dread spiraling through her body. "Join us," it urged again, voice gnarled with triumph. With one last fight, Sarah pushed herself forward, breaking the connection like a taut string snapping. She tumbled through the window into the world outside, breathless and trembling. But freedom was bittersweet. The air felt thick, almost gelatinous. They stumbled onto an empty street illuminated by a sickly yellow glow. The sky was a churning clockwork of dark clouds, casting ghostly shapes across the pavement. "What is this place?" Lily's voice trembled, fear edging into confusion. "Something is wrong," Sarah muttered, scanning their surroundings. Memory flickered, but nothing seemed familiar. In the distance, beyond the fog bound in shadows, figures began to emerge. More twisted forms, faces once human, now lost in darkness. "We can't stay here." But the figures drew closer, a haunting parade of whispers and shadows. Their intentions were clear. They wanted Sarah and Lily back. "Mom!" Lily tugged at her arm, eyes wide with terror. "What do we do now?" The shadows flared and whispered, closing around them like a serpent squeezing its prey. Sarah felt time slipping, an alien pressure building around their hearts. Deep down, she knew this was far from over. How far would they have to go to unravel this horror? Did the escape lead into greater darkness? Together they took steps into the unknown, the very fabric of sanity fraying with each pulse of despair that enveloped them. What would await them deeper in this nightmare? For a moment, they simply stood there, caught in the sickly glow of the street lamps that flickered above. The heaviness of the air pressed down on them like a suffocating blanket. Sarah's heart raced, pumping fear through her veins. "We have to find somewhere safe," she whispered hoarsely, guiding Lily towards the nearest building. It loomed before them, a decaying structure wrapped in shadows. The windows were black voids, and its entrance hung slightly ajar, creaking ominously in the wind. Every instinct screamed for Sarah to turn back, but the figures behind them closed in, swirling like a tempest of despair. "Mom, I don't want to go in there," Lily whimpered, gripping Sarah's hand tighter. "I know, sweetheart."
"But it's our only chance," Sarah said, forcing herself to believe it. She pushed the door open, and it groaned as if protesting their entry. Inside, the stale air was thick with the odor of mildew and dust. The dim light barely illuminated rows of forgotten furniture. They stepped into what looked like an abandoned office space, files strewn across the floor, half-open drawers in disarray. Sarah scanned the room quickly, looking for any signs of human presence, or at least clues to what had happened here. "I don't like it, Mom." Lily's voice was barely above a whisper, her little body trembling beside her. "Neither do I," Sarah replied, forcing calmness into her tone. "But we need to keep moving." They ventured deeper into the office, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the silence. Closer to the back, a flickering light caught Sarah's attention, a television in a corner, static crackling, images flickering wildly, too fast to comprehend. Her breath hitched when she saw shapes flash across the screen. It was them, their faces twisted and warped into grotesque smiles, trapped in a loop of laughter and horror. "No," she said softly, despair clawing at her throat. "What is that?" Lily asked, eyes wide, glimmering with tears. Sarah shook her head, trying to tear her gaze from the screen. "Just a trick. Don't look, Lily, just—" But something pulled her. It was a sound, a low, haunting chant, weaving through the air like a siren's call. Curiosity mixed with dread and forced her feet closer. Lily! Mom! The urgency in her daughter's plea snapped her back. She turned, and the moment froze. A figure appeared at the doorway, even darker than the shadows around it. It stood there with an unmoving presence, shivering as if part of the darkness itself. "Come, join us," it murmured, voice sweet and sickening, oozing further into their minds. Sarah felt her heartbeat explode in her ears. "Run, Lily, now!" They bolted towards the opposite door, but an unseen force pressed against them, gripping their limbs with chilled fingers. Each step felt like wading through syrup. The laughter cascaded around them, an echo that reverberated through the air. The figures from the street materialized, swirling around the office, faces transforming with every blink. People she didn't recognize, people forgotten. They were trapping them, preventing any escape. Heart racing, Sarah pressed against the door, pushing, the wood splintering beneath her hands. "Mom, they're everywhere!" She hesitated, glancing back. The figures were closing in, voices blending into a terrifying symphony. Desperation surged within her. She pulled hard, forcing the door, and as it burst open, cold air rushed in like salvation. "Come on," she shouted, shoving Lily through the doorway. They tumbled out into the night, but their sense of freedom was short-lived.
The street was empty again, the shadows now swirling at their feet, hungry whispers wrapping around their ankles like vines. "Where do we go?" Lily cried, her voice thin with fear. Sarah looked helplessly in every direction, shadows slinking closer. We have to find the light. We have to." But the statement hung in the air, frail and shaky. A shrill scream broke the thick air, shattering their thoughts. It sent icy fingers down Sarah's spine, and she turned, heart in her throat, to find a figure in the distance. Clad in darkness, it pointed directly at them. "Join us," it called again, louder now, commanding. A chill swept over Sarah as the air filled with rustling whispers from every direction. "Mom, what do we do?" The figures were rushing toward them, a stampede of dread and despair. "Run!" But fleeing felt futile as they pressed against her. The scream echoed, and Sarah's world began to spin. In that moment of terror, another figure stepped from the shadows, one that struck closer to home. "Sarah," it whispered. Panic surged again. Did she know this one? And if so, what horrors awaited in the depths of the night? Would they truly find an escape, or was the darkness destined to swallow them whole? Her breath came in short, harsh bursts. The shadows twisted and contorted, pulsating with a life of their own, while the figure that stepped forward looked hauntingly familiar. Sarah squinted, trying to discern its features through the oppressive veil of darkness. "Is that?" Lily's voice quivered, clinging to the edge of hope. "Mom? Is it Dad?" But the figure only pointed, a skeletal hand beckoning them closer. The familiar face was lined with sorrow, but no light sparkled in the eyes that stared into Sarah's soul. "Come to us, Sarah," it crooned, voice dripping with a mixture of love and despair. "We've been waiting for you." "No!" Sarah shouted, clutching Lily's arm tighter. They turned to flee, but the shadows surged forward, enveloping them in darkness, ensnaring their movements. With every desperate stride, it felt as if the ground beneath them transformed into a viscous quicksand, pulling them down, freezing them in place. "Mom, I can't breathe," Lily gasped, her small frame trembling, fear coursing through them like electricity. "Just hold on," Sarah hissed, her mind racing with thoughts of escape. A flicker of instinct drove her as she started to pull Lily toward the edges of the building, instinctively searching for light, for any break in the suffocating darkness. But the laughter returned, mocking, twisting and echoing around them. "Stay with us." The voices were everywhere, weaving through the shadows, digging claws into her mind, whispering terrible truths that danced tantalizingly beyond comprehension. Somehow the ancient structure seemed as if it were alive, groaning under the weight of malevolent spirits that longed to claim them. "Mom, please."
"Lily!" whimpered, tears streaming down her cheeks, their warmth freezing against the chill surrounding them. Sarah suddenly stopped, something gnawing at her hazy memories. The light. I saw it. She could almost feel the warmth, almost reach it. With renewed determination, she turned and shoved through the door behind them, pulling Lily along with her, and the darkness howled in frustration. Inside, the fluorescent glow of the television pulsed like an erratic heartbeat, illuminating the room. The screen was alive, flickering with even more grotesque images of twisted faces. Yet, through the madness, something caught her attention. There was a drawer in the corner that appeared slightly ajar. "Mom, we need to go!" Lily cried, panic rising in her voice. "Just a moment," Sarah yelled, rushing to the desk. She flung the drawer open, scattering old papers and dusty pens, desperately hoping for something, anything that could help. And there it was, a small rusted lantern tucked away in the corner. She grabbed it, feeling the cold metal against her palm. Maybe this will work. She fumbled with the mechanism, desperately trying to remember how to light it. The figures slivered through the cracks, creeping closer, their fingertips stretching into the air like grasping hands. With a final twist and a flick, the lantern ignited, casting a feeble light around them. Suddenly, the laughter quieted, and a hush enveloped the room. For a moment, they were shielded from the encroaching darkness, and Sarah held the lantern high, heart pounding wildly, breath shaky with hope. But the shadows twisted, slinking back from the light, until they coiled forward again. The familiar voice returned, softer now, almost pleading. "Give in, Sarah. Don't fight. Join us." Her heart raced as the silhouettes morphed, their faces now painful reflections of her past, people she had loved faced with anguish. "Lily, we need to make a choice, now." Beyond their surrounding gloom, the doorways yawned open again, promising an escape or oblivion. Fear overwhelmed her, and Sarah clutched Lily tighter. Which way was safety? What darkness awaited them if they chose wrong? "I can't," Lily whimpered, her small hands squeezing Sarah's. "Hold on." Which path would lead them to freedom, and which would drag them back into the suffocating embrace of shadows? As the whispering shadows danced around their light, a choice loomed, one filled with deeper horrors than they could comprehend. What if every road led them to the past? Would they find a way out, or were they forever shackled to the darkness that had claimed so many before them? A chilling gust of wind swept through the room, and the lantern flickered violently, casting their shadows into sharp, grotesque forms on the walls. Sarah's heart raced, the sphere of light a fragile barrier against the horrors closing in. "Mom, please, we have to go now." Lily's voice shook, pulling Sarah from her paralyzed state of fear.
The doorways before them loomed, shadowy paths that promised escape but reeked of abandonment and despair. "Which one, Lily? Which one do we take?" Sarah's voice cracked under the pressure. Each option seemed saturated with darkness, as if the very air held the sighs and cries of those who had come before, urging them back into the depths. The lantern sputtered softly, its glow dimming as if the shadows conspired against it. Just then, the door to the right, the one back towards the television's flickering screen, groaned open wider, a pulse of light emanating from its depths. "Mom, I think," Lily whispered, eyes wide with both fear and fierce hope. Sarah hesitated, a dark memory clawing at her mind, a memory ignited by the pulse of light, that ominous like a struggling heartbeat. "That light, it feels wrong, but—" Then the shadows began to swirl, their whispers sharpening into indistinguishable cries. "Join us! Stay just a little longer!" Her instincts screamed against her to run, yet something, a deep-seated curiosity or that unmistakable bond of love, urged Sarah to step toward the door. "We need to see," she insisted, forcing determination into her voice. Lily fidgeted, eyes darting. "What if it's a trick?" "Then we'll face it together," Sarah promised, though she felt chills creeping up her spine. They edged toward the door, which shimmered with an inviting glow, but promised untold danger. As they crossed the threshold, the atmosphere shifted, a stark contrast to the icy dread that had invaded their previous moments. The room expanded into a vast hall filled with light, but it was not the comforting kind. The walls pulsed softly, mimicking breathing, and shadows crept along the edges, threatening to engulf them again. Suddenly, figures emerged from the walls, their forms tangled in shadows, indistinct but so tantalizingly familiar. Hours passed in moments, the air thick with emotions that brushed against Sarah's heart. The figures looked like family, faces she recognized, but distorted as if seen through rippling water. "Sarah," they chorused, voices echoing like a haunting melody. "Welcome home." Instantly, a sense of dread plunged into Sarah's stomach. She turned to Lily, who had gone pale, her eyes wide with terror. "Mom, don't listen. We have to leave." But Sarah felt rooted, their words weaving through her mind like a dark enchantment. "No, it's just a trick. We can't stay."
She pulled Lily back, but the very air around them hardened, as if it were alive, resisting their every movement. Sarah stumbled, crashing into a wall of spectral figures. They pressed close, their faces inches from hers, the grief in their eyes washing over her like icy water. "Stay with us. Join us forever." "Get back." She swung the lantern, its light flaring against the advancing figures, their faces shifting from admiration to anger.
The light sliced through them, revealing strands of sorrow and terror that intermingled, forming a dark tapestry of despair. With renewed urgency, Sarah dashed toward the back of the hall, dragging Lily along. "We have to find another way out." They raced past the gaunt, sorrowful figures, the whispers growing frantic, clawing at the edges of their resolve. Just ahead, a staircase spiraled upward into darkness. The promise of escape lured them in. "Mom, please, don't leave me," Lily cried, struggling against the unseen grip of the shadows that reached out with cold fingers. "Hold on, I won't let go." Sarah's heart pounded as they ascended, every step echoing with the memories of those lost, their anguished wails rimming the edges of her sanity. It loomed ahead, a door at the top, light spilling through its cracks. But as they reached for it, the shadows erupted, forming a wall, blocking their path, laughter boiling from its depths. "Join us, Sarah. Join us forever." Desperation heightened as Sarah's thoughts spun wild. She had to decide, fight or yield, flee or embrace the darkness that beckoned her family back into its unfathomable depths. With the shadows swirling around her, Sarah took a deep breath, brain racing with memories and choices. "Lily, whatever happens, don't let go of my hand." As she plowed through the darkness, determination surged within her. But as they approached the door, it suddenly burst open, revealing a blinding light that shattered the shadows entirely. Yet the laughter didn't cease. It echoed. It rose, fluttering defiance, beckoning them with twisted promises. And just as they reached the threshold, a chill swept over them, fingertips of darkness brushing Lily's shoulder, leaving a cold mark on her skin. What if the light held a different kind of terror? What if they weren't escaping the darkness at all? Desperation clawed at Sarah as she pulled her daughter closer. Would they walk into salvation or a trap designed for souls like theirs? Time hung in the air, and Sarah sensed the shadows were waiting, every second stretching, tremors of palpable fear lingering as they took just a step forward into the unknown. The light enveloped them, blinding and fierce, but as Sarah and Lily stepped through, it felt like passing through a veil, a breath of fresh air against the heavy weight of the darkness that had chased them. Their instincts screamed for each other, for comfort, for safety. "Are we out?" Lily breathed, her small voice filled with both hope and fear. Sarah tightened her grip on her daughter, scanning their surroundings. They weren't in the office anymore. They stood in an illuminated space, a large room flooded with a golden glow, walls lined with familiar images, family portraits, smiles captured in moments of joy. And yet, a string of dread pulled tight in her chest. It was almost too perfect, a polished living room bathed in warmth, but something was undeniably wrong.
"Mom, I don't like it here," Lily said, trembling beside her. Sarah scanned the room again. Familiar faces seemed to dance in and out of the light, flickering messages of warmth mixed with foreboding, sweet smiles trapped behind shards of a mirror. "We have to stay strong, Lily. This is just another illusion," she whispered, even as doubt gripped her heart. But then a voice pierced through, soft yet commanding. "Sarah? Welcome home." From the shadows stepped a figure, slender and graceful, recognition creeping unbidden into Sarah's mind. "Dad?" she gasped, horrified yet entranced. The face was a mixture of warmth and sorrow, the same shade of brown eyes that had filled her childhood with laughter. Yet those same eyes now sparkled with something that felt altogether more sinister. "Join us. We've been waiting." The words danced in the air, coaxing, pulling. Shadows curled around them like heavy vines, threatening to close in. "It's safe here," he urged, voice laced with a haunting melody, a call to surrender. "No!" Sarah shouted, and for an instant the air grew still, the shadows quivered. "Sarah?" Her father's face shifted, the familiarity warped, losing definition. The room vibrated with his pleading. "You can't fight what's inside you. Let it in." The pressure mounted like a tightly coiled spring, tugging at Sarah's insides, threatening to burst. "Lily, hold on tight."
She recoiled, recognizing the depths of manipulation. Memories shot through her mind, laughter in the fading light, the joy they'd shared, the warmth that had always meant safety. But this was different. "Mom!" Lily shrieked, fear coating her tone. The shadows slithered closer, snaking around their ankles, trying to pull them apart. "Fight it!" Sarah screamed, feeling the cold seeping into her skin, and she began to shake, her body trembling as she focused on Lily and the love she held for her daughter. "You don't want this!" But the world around them pulsed with shadows, and the dreamlike visions consumed Sarah's thoughts. She saw her father's face morph again, anger bubbling beneath affectionate surfaces. "You really think you can escape? It's a part of you, Sarah. Let us in." "No!" That burned within her. "This isn't love. This is a cage." With all her might, she grasped the lantern tightly, flipping the switch, igniting the flame of bravery that had flickered dimly within her. "Stay back!" she shouted, thrusting the lantern forward. The fabric of illusion tore at the seams, splintering, fragmenting, revealing the darkness beneath. The shadows shrieked, recoiling from the light, momentarily breaking their grip. With a frantic tug, she pulled Lily forward. "This way!" They dashed toward an arched doorway glowing far beyond, feeling the rush of shadows snap and hiss behind them, desperately clutching, longing, swirling in confusion.
Lily's breath echoed as they sprinted through the arch, the light pressing into every crevice of doubt in Sarah's heart. "Mom, are we safe?" "I hope so," Sarah replied, heart racing. "But we have to keep moving." The corridor they entered was alive with pulsating light, like a heartbeat guiding their escape. Flashes of familiarity and home spun around them, echoes of laughter, whispers of secrets, bolts of cherished memories that now felt like a stark contrast to the shadows behind them. She pressed on, clutching Lily's hand tightly. Though the laughter echoed futilely into the distance, Sarah found herself at the end of the corridor, the thundering pulse of the shadows growing weaker. As they reached the final door marked in gold, trembling breaths fueling their resolve, Sarah turned to Lily. "Whatever happens next, I know, Mom, we can get through this together." With a deep breath, they burst through, revealing a bright outside world, a serene version of the neighborhood she once knew. The manicured lawns, the picket fences all glimmered golden under a mighty sun. "Look!" Lily pointed, eyes wide, illuminated by the brightness. But even as they stood awash in sunlit safety, Sarah noticed the shadows pulse ominously at the edges of the light, swaying like a repressed horror still waiting to rise at dawn. Yet for the first time, she felt different. "We're free," she said softly, though uncertainty lurked in her mind. They looked at each other, the warmth of the sun unraveling the icy grips of shadows that had followed them. As they began to walk hand in hand away from the dark, Sarah squeezed Lily's hand reassuringly. "Together, we can face whatever comes next." And though the lingering whispers would still haunt her, she chose to focus on the warmth of the moment, the light that burned golden, fierce and strong. Step by step, they weaved through the neighborhood, leaving the darker memories behind and setting a new path forward. Though fear still lurked in the shadows, she realized some battles never truly leave us. They shape us, fueling a spark of resilience as they ventured towards a future redirecting their lives. The darkness may gather, but Sarah understood. Together, they were unbreakable. Now, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and share the love. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this wild conclusion. And don't wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions. Let's build this community together.